Thank you. We'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and we'll jump to the next question, and then we'll take another one from the chat. We have a question here submitted by Nancy. And Nancy asks, do you support the clean fuel standard? I am aware that it passed the House in 2020, but did not make it through the Senate. What specific things can we do to get it through the Senate this session? And I'll give a chance for everyone to chime in here, but we can start with Senator Frock, since it is specific to the Senate.
Okay. Well, yeah, the answer is I do support the clean fuel standard. I've supported it in the past. I think this is critical to our overall climate change policy in the state and to us getting towards the climate reduction, carbon reduction goals that we put into law several years ago. We're not there. I think this can be done in a way that will. How should I say? I don't think this is going to have the effect on gasoline prices that people say it does. I think there are many other factors that go into gasoline prices, but I think that the benefit of this is this will encourage technologies to be developed for cleaner fuels and for other types of ways for people for transportation to be run cleaner. I'm not articulating that very well, but you get the point. So that's the general thought and the policy behind the clean fuel standard, and that seems to be what's happening in other states that have adopted it. So I do support it. In terms of getting it through the Senate, I think we've got more senators and a new senator that I think is, I don't want to speak for the new senator, but we exchanged out, I think, one person who was not in favor of it for one who might be in favor of it. I think that will help. These bills are very close. The Senate is divided right now, 28 to 21, Democrat to Republican. And so that means that in any particular bill, particularly the controversial ones, Democrats, if there's something that Democrats want to do and Republicans don't, it tends to have to pass with, you can only use 3 or 4 members really for the bill not to pass. So we've got to keep working on it, and I think there is the possibility for a grand bargain on clean fuels and other parts of our transportation policy.
If I could, Travis, can I chime in?
Yeah, please.
Yes, great. Yeah. I mean, I've has heard this bill a couple of times, both on the House Transportation Committee and then voted for it off the floor. Each time it's been a very grueling debate, not only in committee but also on the floor. I think we have spent hours and hours before we're finally able to pass it. But if there's a way for you all to help us our Democratic majorities have supported this in the House, but we need help, as Senator Frock said, in the Senate. And if you have relatives or friends who live in those districts with state senators or even state representatives who don't support it, the more that they can do to lobby them and talk to their own legislators, and hopefully to get them to understand the importance of passing that legislation. One vote can help. One vote can help.
And then, Representative Paulette, did you want to speak?
Yeah. Well, 2 things. One, in terms of getting through as many questions as possible, I want to let people know that in general, one of us will answer a question, and all 3 of us, even if we say aye, all 3 of us are in agreement on it, and we'll tell you otherwise. I just want to assure you about that. On climate change, in addition to clean fuels, which is vitally important, I think that this will be the year that we update the Growth Management Act to incorporate climate change goals and how we meet our greenhouse gas emission standards for the goals for the entire state in how we plan county by county, city by city for transportation, housing, transit. We need to do that, and this is the year I think that we will be updating the Growth Management Act to do it. I also want to say a year ago, some of you will recall from last year's town hall, I have been working with climate change organizations to have a statewide best science standard to look at the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions from all fossil fuel projects in the state of Washington. And Governor Inslee didn't wait for the legislature to pass it. He told the Department of Ecology to adopt the rules to put this in place, and it will be an incredible asset to us. And you can comment on the rules at Ecology's website. And then finally, I think that we will do either cap and trade or a carbon tax this year. Probably a little more likely cap and trade, but it's all in play. And this is the year to do it. And I think it's going to happen.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to a question from the chat, which I just had open and then I lost. So 1 second while I pull that back up. Okay. The question that I have here is, well, they say, first off, thank you for doing this. Please consider the racial disparities of the impact of COVID-19. How do you plan to address these disparities in the economic recovery? Would both Senator Frost and Rep. Valdez address this question? Rep. Valdez, would you like to take this one first?
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for the question. I don't know, I can't see in the chat who asked it, but thank you for asking that question. Yes, I mean, we know that people of color and racial minorities have definitely have been hit hard in terms of our COVID-19 pandemic. I know this fall I worked with was part of in our discussion with the governor, especially when it came to our undocumented workers here in our state, who of course were excluded from the first round of federal dollars and support for those who are being impacted by COVID. So I work with the governor's office as well as a few of my colleagues, and we were able then to deliver $40 million in COVID relief to our undocumented workers throughout the state. And I know that there is a plan to push forward more of those funds here in 2021, and I'll be a strong supporter of that as well.
Thank you. And Senator Frost, you were mentioned. Did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I agree that disproportionately COVID has really hit minority communities really bad. We've had more outbreak in South Seattle than in North Seattle. I mean, we've had problems all over. I would say that relative to other states, and I think, obviously there have been a lot of concerns raised about the course that we've taken with emergency orders and so forth, that Washington State has actually the 5th lowest case rate in the country, a daily average that is lower than comparable sized states like Georgia, Massachusetts in particular. So these measures have saved lives. There can be no question about that. And you look at other states of similar size that have not been as aggressive as we have been, they have much higher death rates and case rates. And I think we have to acknowledge that. That is not to say that the closures have not been painful economically. They are the subject of much debate. Some of us have been involved. I've been involved recently in a little bit in the new order, at least talking to the governor's office about, is there a way for some places to manage this if they can be done safely. The governor, for example, took some measures to have a new reopening plan for example, some indoor facilities that are done by appointment, for example, indoor athletic facilities, et cetera. That was one that's been really hurt, and we've seen that in our Economic Recovery Committee, that certain sectors have been hit really bad. Obviously, hospitality, restaurants, fitness, they have just been devastated in terms of the way that those businesses operated, and that has a disproportionate impact economically on those workers who are in those spaces. Many times, particularly in the hospitality sector, are minority workers who are working in those kinds of industries, but in other industries as well. So I think one thing that is important to think about and to acknowledge is that in the vaccine dissemination plan, which just came out today, I would encourage you to look in the Seattle Times about this, that essential workers are there are a number of categories, but basically a lot of spaces where you would have generally people in those populations who have been deemed essential and who are more exposed to other people are higher up in the vaccine distribution list. And my hope is that we can get as many people as possible vaccinated in the next few months, and that will bring down those case rates and offer those people protection. So it's a complicated endeavor. It's not going to be perfect. We're all doing this for the first time, but I think with the vaccine, we do have some hope to help people immediately.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go back to one of our submitted questions. This one is from Bill, who asks, first says that Washington has one of the most unfair regressive tax systems because of its reliance on sales, property, B&O, and fuel taxes for revenue. With the fiscal challenges the state is facing due to the pandemic, now is the time to replace most of those taxes with an income tax. Why isn't anyone working on that?
Well, this is definitely the time to change our upside down regressive tax system at a time when we need funding to create a safety net for all the people who have been hurt so badly, especially communities of color and immigrant communities, as we were just talking about in terms of COVID. The people at the bottom shouldn't be paying for this safety net when the people at the top have made out wonderfully well in the midst of the pandemic. And we have very strong support in the Senate and House Democratic caucuses for progressive revenue, from capital gains tax to high income earner corporate head tax, essentially. Payroll tax is what it really is for people earning over 200,000 or some similar figure that we'll be working on trying to adjust. But there's no reason to think that we're going to try to preserve a safety net on the backs of the people who need saving. That's just wrong. It's time to change it, and we're committed to doing that.
Thank you. And Senator Frocht, I think you wanted to...
Yeah, if I could just jump in on one thing. So I agree with Jerry that I think there is a growing support to look at capital gains as contributing to our tax policy in Washington. I think we have to be smart about our tax policy. I think we need to be acknowledge that many small businesses have been hurting, and I've been looking at that. There's some things we can do to relieve some of their unemployment burden. They're going to see rate increases in the coming year because of layoffs, many of which were really not related to any of their own business conditions other than the pandemic that was sort of foisted upon them. And so I think there's some things we can do there. I think there's growing support for the capital gains in the state Senate. I'm not so sure about the payroll tax in the Senate per se, but one thing I would note, and I think people need to understand a couple of things. There's a few big things that I think need to be done this year. We have to reinvest strongly in our public health system. That is going to require several $100 million. And I think we've seen the problems with a grossly underfunded public health system. As well, I think we need to invest more aggressively in childcare and provide more childcare options for people, not just for people at the lowest end of our economic spectrum, but also people in the lower and middle income who don't qualify for subsidized care. They have to have some ability to have affordable options for childcare. That's good for their families. That's good for the economy. That allows people to go back to work and be more productive if they choose to do that. We just don't have those affordable options, and we've got to find some ways to help there. And those are two particular areas that require more investment. And so I think that's where you're going to see some of these proposals linked to those kinds of things that need to happen in public health and childcare in particular. So that's kind of the situation as I see it right now. Great,
thank you. We have another submitted question here that I thought we should get to, and this one is on higher education. This is from Phyllis, and Phyllis has asked, what does the budget look like for community and technical colleges? They are critical to preparing the workforce to improve our economy. And I think, Representative Pallette, maybe you can take this one.
Well, first off, hello, Phyllis, from all of us. And I'm assuming that this might just be a former representative and member of the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges. Community and technical colleges are the real democratic grassroots entry point for people who will change their lives and to get back into careers and workforce after the pandemic. And we made a nation-leading investment in access to post-secondary education, both degrees and workforce certification 2 years ago, with a new tax on wealth and expanding access, and basically saying, if you are a student graduating from high school or returning to go to college for workforce certification or a degree, and your family earns less than 70% of the median income in this state, we're guaranteeing that we'll be covering at least most of your tuition. And we're going to be increasing that up to the median income over the next few years. And it's a guarantee. It's the Washington version of the Washington Promise. And for community and technical colleges, which have 2/3 of the students in higher education in our state, we have to make sure that the students who come in the front door aren't abandoned. They need support to get out the back door in a reasonable period of time. And we are proposing major legislation with a major new investment to support our community and technical colleges to help students get their degree or workforce certification in a reasonable period of time, with advising and mentoring and career assistance and the services that we know from other states that have made these investments. They have doubled their community college graduation rates in just a number of years, and it's time for us to do the same.
Thank you. I'm actually going to jump around here for a second, because we have had a couple of folks have asked us in the chat, and we have a couple of submitted questions about transportation, particularly safety. So I'm gonna jump to a question about the Aurora Avenue Bridge. In the last 2 years on Aurora Ave, 9 people have been killed and 18 seriously injured by traffic, mostly pedestrians. 1.5 miles of Aurora lacks sidewalks on one or both sides. Both WSDOT and SDOT have dual jurisdiction. Will you commit to funding $20 million for safety studies and improvement on Aurora out of WSDOT's approximately $6.7 biennial budget as a start on the $100 to $150 million corridor improvement in partnership with Seattle, King County, and others? And that one's from Lee. And I'll go ahead and let Representative Valdez take that one.
Sure. And thank you, Lee, for that question. And I mean, we're all aware of the pedestrian safety issues along Aurora. I think just the other day we got another. I think all of us, Senator Frock, Representative Follett, and I got another lengthy email about some of the issues that are going on there. But I will say, in regards to our transportation funding, this is one of the things that I have been working on over the last several months with our chair and a few members of our House Transportation Committee, or at least on our Democratic caucus. We are going to be looking at putting forward a new transportation package here in 2021 that can significantly try to making sure that we become a little bit more modern and take care of issues as in terms of, for example, on our pedestrian safety, as the question asked. We have we know we have to deal with issues regarding on our revenue side due to the lack of gas taxes that have come in because of the pandemic. Our tolling money is down, our ferry revenue is down, but we're looking to make significant investments in WSDOT to provide for more projects, more preservation and maintenance, as we heard from stakeholders consistently about the need for this. But it's important that also, when it comes to safety, that we work closely with the city of Seattle. And I'll be honest with you, as a member of the House Transportation Committee, we don't always hear a lot from the city on what's important to them and how can we as a delegation help them fund some of their local projects as well. I mean, we've heard from the city over the summer and the fall on the West Seattle Bridge, and we as a legislature must step up to help with that, because that is a state bridge. It's not that impacts our state and our state economy. But I will say that we need more cooperation from the city and SDOT to finding out what projects can we support them on, and what can we do to make things safer, especially along Aurora, where we know all the issues that have been going on there for decades that have been ignored.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll move to another question that I'm looking at here that was submitted earlier this week. The question here is partly involved, wants to know a little bit about social services, and particularly prioritizing funding for foster care and disability services. The question that has been raised in chat and also that was emailed in is that they're worried about cuts in the budget to foster care and disability services, and that there's been progress over the past few years, but they still need improvements. And in what way will this funding be maintained and grown in the current economic environment? And that's a question from Belinda, and then it was raised a couple times in chat. So Senator Frachta, I see you nodding. Would you like to take that one, start that off?
Well, first of all, I would say that thank you for the question. I know this. There's so many people that who this affects in terms of, for example, DD services, but also our foster care system. I think we'll do everything that we can to avoid cuts in this space. And I would give a little bit of context for the budget situation at this point. The budget situation is better than we thought it was going to be last spring, but it's not perfect, and it's certainly not completely clear because with the school situations, the schools being closed, we have basically a sort of an illusory gain that we've gotten in state revenues from school populations being down as we allocate funding to the tune of 500, 750 million, something in that range, maybe even up to $1 billion. So we thought we were going to have a complete crash last spring when the COVID crisis hit and the recession first took hold. There has been recovery, and we're doing better. It's not clear to me what it's going to look like when we come into the new year, because we've then had another fall off as the second wave has hit us. Economic, I think, fall off a little bit just in the last couple of months. So it's a very fluid situation from the budget. Having said all that, the governor asked for agencies to go around and sort of model 15% cuts early on in the crisis. And in some parts of his budget, it's not clear exactly how those played out and what he actually proposed. But in terms of what I think the legislature is going to do, I can tell you that I think we're going to do everything we can to not cut those vital areas of social services for people in need, which is many people during this very difficult economic climate. And I will say in particular, in terms of foster care, this is something that Representative Valdez, Representative Paulette, and I have worked on. We need to do better. We need to make sure we provide supports and housing for young people who are coming out of extended foster care so that they don't graduate from state care and go right onto the street if they don't have any other options. We've got to find supports for them. We need to do better for this population of foster children that are ending up staying in hotels and offices because we don't have appropriate settings for them when they have to be removed from their parents because of abuse or neglect or other problems that they are facing. This is a significant problem we've had. Unfortunately, I think that the DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, has not done enough in the last year to solve the crisis in this space, even where we have appropriated money. And I know that we have given them the money for it because I was involved in giving them the money for it. So as a consequence, we have providers like Ryther here in our own district who have not been able to contract. And it's a complicated situation, but the bottom line is our state needs to do better, and we need to invest the money, but we also need to have better execution from the agencies that are administering the system. That's my view based on what I've seen.
Thank you. We're going to move to another question. We've had a couple of folks ask about education and school funding in the state, and also in particular about when schools will be opening up. And the question I'm looking at here is from Bonnie. She says schools across Washington and across the country have reopened or are actively planning for reopening, as numerous studies confirm that schools are not significant hubs of transmission. Seattle Public Schools is bucking the trend. How can we get our kids back into buildings? Students from all backgrounds are suffering academically, socially, and emotionally. And Representative Paulette, would you like to take that one?
Thanks. I agree with part of that and not entirely with some of it. For younger children and elementary schools, there isn't any strong evidence that COVID spreads, but there is evidence for high schools and serious. And we've had areas where we opened up in Washington State schools previously, and we had some serious spread along with other places around the nation. But we know how to open schools safely. As a faculty member in the UW School of Public Health, I've recently hosted a forum with experts from Harvard, University of Colorado Boulder, DC, others about the need for updating our HEPA air filtration filters at schools and providing the other PPE, et cetera, that we know work, along with contact tracing, that would allow us to reopen much earlier than has been planned. And we can do it. Then comes Seattle. And Seattle Public Schools is pretty much, I've been riding them hard. Three of us have, along with much of the Seattle legislative delegation. They are very recalcitrant. And an example of that is I started working in June for them to offer the most vulnerable students with disabilities who needed in-person therapy. And losing a year of therapy means irreversible lifelong damage. And they can get that therapy in any other setting, but the school district wouldn't reopen for in-person, very limited, with all the protections in place that the therapists were using in any other setting. And school district, as people probably saw in the Seattle Times at the beginning of December, was barely serving any district students with disabilities. We've got to get them off the dime, and they have a tough job to do. They have severe budget shortfalls that we're working on together as a Seattle delegation to make sure that they don't lose $35 million out of their budget, which is at risk right now because of COVID. But they have to also work with the public health experts to reopen.
Thank you. And then Senator Frocht, you wanted to go next? Oh, Senator Frocht? No, I'm going to unmute you and mute you again. No, well, we've lost your voice. we'll try to get you back here. Okay, well then we'll move on here to another question. Again, we have questions that have been submitted in advance that were emailed in. So I'm going to move to one of those, and this question is from Bess, who is asking, what are you doing to ensure small businesses are able to recover from the government-mandated shutdown? Have you considered suspending taxes for small businesses instead of taking our money via taxes and redistributing it via grants and unemployment? Representative Valdez, would you like to start off with this one?
You were cutting in and out a little bit. Can you repeat that, Travis?
Sure. The question is just about COVID response and how and what folks are planning to do to ensure that small businesses are able to recover.
Yeah, great question. I mean, we definitely know that, of course, small business has been heavily impacted by COVID with a lot of the shutdowns, some of the restrictions, of course, on social distancing. We have, as a state, put more funds into grants as well. But we know we still have a lot of businesses out there, and our small businesses in particular, especially in our retail industry and our restaurant industry, have been, they're hurting. And we need to making sure that we are finding the appropriate funds to help them sustain their business while we slowly, get out of this pandemic. In terms of what new revenues are, I mean, the governor will put forward a package here, and we will take a look at that very seriously. But I think it's very safe to say that we are all aware of how much our small businesses are hurting, and want to make sure that we are doing what we can to make sure that they survive. It's been tough for them over the past 9-10 months, and we want to make sure that we are doing what we can to making sure that they still survive and are able to recover here as we get out as we get out of this pandemic.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I apologize. I was going to say something about. Can I talk for a sec, Travis? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. On the question of school reopening, I just very briefly, I was just in a briefing. I want to let the people know that I was just in a briefing earlier today with some other senators, as well as the new director of public health for the state of Washington, Dr. Shaw. And I think one thing that people should be aware of is that they are running right now a trial in January for possible school reopenings. They're working with 13 different districts, and they're going to have some specific recommendations on what can happen based on what we think they'll see over the next month. Sort of more guidelines and so forth, which would include countermeasures and many of the things that Jerry just talked about. So this is a difficult problem. I think in any reopening situation, we have to acknowledge that there needs to be options for those parents who are not yet wanting to send their children back, that they have to have virtual options available to them. I think that's important. That said, another piece of this is in the governor's vaccination plan, he has prioritized educators and teachers, and I presume it would be those in particular in the early grades who teach in those grades that would be able to have the vaccine available to them if they choose to have it. I don't think we're going to see a vaccine mandate, but I do think it would be available to them, and that would be another way to make sure we're affording protection to the staff who are in schools. With regards to small business, I agree that our small businesses are hurting, and in particular in these sectors related to hospitality. I've worked on something, and we'll have a report coming out very shortly, probably the next day or two, from our Economic Recovery Committee that I was involved in over the summer of some things we need to do. But to answer the question directly, I think that there should be some relief that we can provide. We need to continue to provide the grants that we were able to do at the state level. They've also had access to PPP in some instances, but we just put $100 million into a grant program and a small business loan program at low interest that will be coming online very shortly. And those were just awarded. So that should help to some degree. We need to make sure that we do something about this unemployment insurance situation for businesses so that they have some relief. So maybe we stretch out refunding the uninsurance pool, as well as with loans that we can get from the federal government to reconstitute the uninsurance pool, so that we don't have huge rate increases for small businesses as we start to recover. And I think, frankly, from my perspective, I think we should be open to some kind of small business relief. I'm open to that discussion. I think that is important. But we have to remember, companies that are, with the B&O tax, which I don't particularly like, but it is a tax on receipts and gross revenues. So when companies are not earning, they're not paying those taxes directly. There's problems with that system, but we need to, in my view, find some ways to provide relief. Also, in terms of if there are ways to do some permitting and make things happen quicker at the local level, we need to encourage that so the business can begin to operate as soon as we get back to normal.
Are we back? Do we have sound? I just say we are very conscious also as well of all the people who have been on unemployment and thousands of people who were unable to get unemployment promptly in our state. We've been working hard at reform there, but the three of us and our 3 legislative aides, we only get 1 legislative aide each. The 3 of us and our aides have worked to help hundreds of people get their unemployment compensation after often going months without a penny in income, which all of us can imagine what it'd be like to go without any income suddenly due to the pandemic. And I'm very proud of the work our staff has done to help hundreds of people get their unemployment compensation restored. And I think maybe it's time to wrap up here. Can anyone, do only we hear each other?
I'm hearing you,
I
Jerry.
can hear you, Jerry. I can hear David.
But I'm not sure that anyone online can hear us. I'm seeing sound is gone. If people online can hear us still, please put something in chat saying you can hear us. Okay, you can hear us. Thank you. Okay. Well, Senator Frock, do you want to start a wrap up here?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. We're not getting to every question that was submitted or online. There's a lot of them. We will look through all of them so we get a sense of what's on people's minds. And I want you to know that I've been kind of glancing through. I know there's some people that like some of our answers and some that didn't, but I'm getting a very good sense of what's on people's minds from the questions that have been submitted. And please feel free to follow up with us via email if you want to relay some more information to us as we go into the session. I just want people to know, I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions. There are literally hundreds of them. I think there's more people than we anticipated that would participate. So it's good to do this. I just want to say in closing, thank you for hanging in there. 2020 was a really difficult, terrible year. None of us anticipated. I didn't anticipate when we left Olympia in March. I knew it was going to be a problem. I didn't realize we would be where we are today. And there's a lot of reasons for how we got here, but I just want to thank all of the people of our community for doing the best they can under very difficult circumstances and trying to see them through and to take care of their families. And also in our community in Seattle, I'm proud of the fact that when I go out, I see people taking the public health measures seriously, masking up, social distancing. When I'm out riding my bike on the Burt Gilman Trail or walking, I even see people outside riding the bike with their mask up, for example, which compels me to make sure I put my mask up when I'm on my bike and don't forget to leave it down. So I want to thank all of you, and I think those are saving lives. And just know that we are going to work hard to try to get us through this, get us back to some semblance of normal as soon as we can, and we're going to try to get people the health care they need and make sure they have access to the vaccine, and we can get this economy and get our situation back on track as we get into the new year, hopefully by the early spring. Thank you very much.
I can go next, Representative Pallette. Yes, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for your questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to them all, but we'll get a transcript of what has been written in the chat, so we can ensure that we see what everyone had to ask. And I want to echo the comments of Senator Frock. We know 2020 was a tough year, but we know we still have a tough year until 2021 ahead, until we can all get past this pandemic, and we will. And in time, we will hopefully at some point we'll get back to normal and be able to enjoy our parks and our streets, all not only our district but throughout our cities and throughout our state. You know, we're going to have an interesting, but yet I feel excited 2021 session coming up. You know, it will be bumpy for the first couple of weeks as we work through this all virtual session. But as Representative Pallette alluded to in his very early comments, this is going to really be some unprecedented ways to be able to communicate with us as we have our hearings and be able to listen and see what we do throughout the entire session. And you won't have to be in Olympia if you want to go and testify on behalf of a bill. You can do that from your own living room. So, you know, thank you for all that that you do for us here in our district. It's an honor to be one of your state representatives. And again, feel free to reach out you know, during the session by email or by phone, and we will do our best to get back to you. So, Rep. Pallette, you want to wrap up?
Thank you all for joining us this evening, and please stay in touch with us. Our emails are our first name dot last name at leg.law.gov, and you can get all the information about how to easily sign up to testify or send us emails on bills@leg.law.gov. Track bills. Watch us this session on TVW. Every single committee meeting is live streamed and available to replay. So it makes it really easy. We've made a great investment in TVW. It leads the nation in access, and we're really committed to working for you. Tomorrow, the three of us take our oaths of office, and our commitment is to serve you and the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution to the best of our abilities, to work to make sure that your elected voices are heard. We're listening, and we're very proud and honored to represent you. Let us know how we're doing. Thank you. And be healthy.